Chapter 731, Gains. Illusory black threads emanated out of Signor's body and entered Klein's hands. With every jolt in spirituality, it gave a different reaction. In fact, there was no need to use both hands when controlling the spirit-body threads. Klein was just accustomed to doing so, as it gave him a feeling like he was truly controlling a puppet. From the looks of it, other marionettists can discover each other's marionettes. The Signor's abnormality can't be hidden from their eyes, so I have to be careful about this. Klein concluded the problems he discovered, and he quickly turned his thoughts back onto Signor. This Admiral of Blood was dead. His spirit body had become a vessel for the marionette, losing any traits that belonged to him. Therefore, many divination methods were ineffective against him. Of course, methods to seek his corpse were still effective. Klein planned on cleansing the wraith in the gray fog before using paper angels to envelop the mirror-like objects that he had possessed before placing him into a cigar case that was sealed by a wall of spirituality, along with Isaac's copper whistle. This created a 3-layered interference effect. This way, Klein believed that, even if the Rose School of Thought Angel wished to, it was impossible to use divination to lock onto his position via Admiral of Blood. As for whether the Mother Tree of Desire had left any back doors in Signor's body, he wasn't too worried. This was because, if that really happened, she could have mutated Signor during the demigod battle royale in order to deal with him. Based on the situation back then, there was a guaranteed chance of success. Mother Tree of Desire, or should I say the Chained God, strictly controls its organization's members. It relies on a vow contract and other methods that are ingrained into the soul. This can be inferred from Miss Sharon's descriptions and my interaction with the corresponding characteristics. As long as I don't attempt to use Admiral of Blood to divine the secrets of the Rose School of Thought or the potion formula of the mutant pathway, I wouldn't trigger any problems. The Werewolf Beyonder characteristic has remained normal, despite being above the gray fog for so long. Besides, there's still the gray fog cleansing process. If there are any latent problems, it should be washed out.
He thought for a while and took out Isaac's copper whistle from inside his body. He turned his right wrist and made the side with fewer patterns appear under the sunlight, making it reflect the light.
Immediately, the copper whistle had Signor's figure appear on it as it rapidly turned clear. The Admiral of Blood in front of Klein suddenly vanished as a result.
Perhaps the Mother Tree of Desire can use the vow contract and other methods to vaguely lock on, but that doesn't matter. She can sense the gray fog's unique trait on me anyway, and she will sense me once I'm within range. Besides, this marionette might be destroyed at any time when I use it as a shield. He was like a jobless tramp who was debt-laden. He felt that there was almost nothing he was afraid of. Of course, he really was debt-ridden. As long as I advance to a demigod and can hide my unique trait, it's fine losing marionettes.
Klein surveyed the area as he bent his back to pick up the silver necklace. He took 4 steps counterclockwise while chanting the incantations softly. This time he hadn't entered via summoning his spirit body, so he couldn't directly return. The grayish-white fog was quickly emanated as hysterical ravings and roars echoed for an eternity. Isaac's copper whistle didn't react abnormally, which meant that there weren't any latent problems with Admiral of Blood. Sitting at the end of the bronze table, Klein placed Isaac's copper whistle in front of him, making Signor, who was dressed in a dark red coat and old triangular hat, appear. He was like a butler, awaiting orders from his master. Klein asked, as though Admiral of Blood was still alive.
Do you have any other items on you?
This was his attempt to act as a marionettist. Following that, he controlled Signor, made him rummage through every pocket as he subsequently took out £325, 16 soldi, and 8 pence in cash. There were also 13 gold coins. Apart from that, perhaps due to his frequent act of transforming into a wraith state, Signor didn't carry anything else on him.
How poor. As a pirate admiral, you don't even have a single mystical item. Did you hand it over to the Rose School of Thought or your subordinates? Klein seriously considered cashing out Admiral of Blood via the black market. Just in loan alone, he was worth 42,000 pounds. Yes, claiming the bounty from loan isn't pragmatic. Be it the Church of Storms and the Kingdom's military, they will follow the clues to capture Gehrman Sparrow, who managed to embroil so many demigods in a battle royale, and then investigate the organization backing him. They wouldn't even pay, and they might even plant a trap. By the same logic, the churches and governments of other countries must have similar ideas. However, they might be easier to work with. Retrieving the bounty will require substantial risks. Besides, there's no rush. I'll send Senor out when I plan on switching marionettes. After all, being a marionette for a few days won't change his identity or value.
Klein reined in his thoughts and cast his gaze on the silver necklace with an ancient coin attached to it. He immediately used divination to gain the gist of its origins and usage. It came from a Sequence 5 winner from the Life School of Thought. After dying at the hands of a Rose School of Thought demigod, this gentleman's beyonder characteristic and psyche fused with an ordinary silver necklace that he carried with him, turning into a mystical item. As for the reason why the ordinary silver necklace would be carried by a Sequence 5 powerhouse for extended periods of time, Klein was unable to receive any effective revelations from it, as it had been too long and it had been corrupted. The mystical item had two uses. One was to passively make the wearer lucky. In their daily lifestyle, the owner would encounter good things, easily succeeding in whatever they did. When suffering a lethal blow or terrifying disaster, ridiculous scenes would happen, allowing them to be successfully rescued. The latter situation only lasted for 10 minutes. The second use was to actively give an enemy bad luck, making the target unlucky. Be it in daily life or combat, it was easy for them to experience failure due to some trivial problem. The corresponding negative effects of the necklace was the conservation of luck. After being lucky, they would immediately meet with repeated bad luck. They would be as unlucky as they were lucky before. It needed the wearer to be devoted and seriously avoid any danger. Otherwise, it was very easy for them to die in a comedic manner, and even harm people around them. The luck received in one's daily life would often revert back after a month. The user would end up unlucky, regardless of whether they wore it or not. However, such bad luck was slowly released, so it wasn't too dangerous. And luck obtained in combat would similarly strike back 10 minutes later in a similar vigor.
Overall, this is a rather good mystical item, but I don't have much use for it. After all, Fate Counselor Rakir was unable to change my luck. I'll just wear it on me for now. It has few negative effects on me. I'll sell it if there's a chance to pay off my debt with Miss Messenger. Miss Messenger wants gold coins, while I have gold pounds. It's nearly impossible to exchange 10,000 gold coins through the banks or official markets. From the looks of it, I'll have to do it in batches, getting each Tarot Club member to change some of it.
Klein soon decided on a plan as he casually came up with a name for the necklace, Scales of Luck. Following that, he cast his gaze onto Senor, who was standing reverently to his side. He began to study the powers a wraith had: forceful possession, enemy control, wraith's shriek, mirror blink, obstacle penetration, death-related spells, and invisibility that wouldn't be discovered by most mid- and low-sequence beyonders. Klein distinguished each power, and he matched them with Sharon's and Merrick's description, as well as his experience gained from combat. He soon concluded this, afraid that the candle in the outside world would finish burning. And a dark cave was extremely bad for the present, him who had a phobia of the dark. Dachiem. Klein immediately took out a paper figurine from the junk pile, and together with the Black Emperor card, he stirred some of the powers above the gray fog, turning it into an anti-divination, quote, angel. This angel rapidly spread its wings and wrapped around a gold coin. On its reflective side was Signor's figure. Then Klein brought the gold coin, Azek's copper whistle, death knell, and his suitcase back to the real world. As for Creeping Hunger and Grozel's travels, one of them hadn't been fed, and the other might cause Klein to be swallowed into the book for carrying it for too long. Therefore, they were left in the junk pile above the gray fog. Having returned to the cave, Klein hurriedly placed the gold coin and Azek's copper whistle into a cigar case before sealing it with a wall of spirituality. He cleaned up the scene, switched into formal clothes, and carried his suitcase. He followed the beach until he came to a residential area. He discovered that he was near Pritz Harbor. He didn't immediately return to Backland. Instead, he changed his appearance, took a steam locomotive, and headed for Conant City in Desi Bay. He planned on circling the area once before changing his identity again. Banzi Harbor. Alger Wilson looked at the destroyed city under the afternoon sun. He saw that the buildings had completely collapsed, and there were deep chasms in the ground and charred spots everywhere. Such a scene extended into the depths of the island. Even the mountain had collapsed. At that moment, there wasn't anyone from the Church of Storms watching the ruins, since there wasn't anything here. And the plans to rebuild the harbor wasn't brought forward at all. Alger jumped off the Blue Avenger and circled the ruins with his sailors, but they didn't discover anything of value.
Let's go.
He soon boarded the ship, which hoisted its sails and left the island. After an unknown period of time, a figure suddenly walked out from the depths of the ruins. He wore a double-breasted, pure black clerical robe. He had dark golden hair, and his facial features were clear and distinct, like an ancient classical sculpture without any wrinkles. His eyes were dark blue, nearing black. They looked lusterless, but they were filled with dense blood capillaries. Chapter 732, Destination. Desi County, Conant City, 67 Red Indus Street. Wearing a commonly seen face in the Lowen Kingdom, Klein took a step forward and rang the doorbell. In less than a minute, the door creaked open as a maidservant looked out and asked out of curiosity, "Pop Boer." "Good evening. Who might you be looking for?" "Pop Boer. I'm here to find Ma'am Nilu." "I'm a friend of her father, Davy Raymond," Klein answered calmly. Davy Raymond was the nightmare who he had released from creeping hunger. It was a red glove from the Nighthawks, and the first thing on his mind before he dissipated was his daughter, Nilu Raymond. He was very apologetic towards her for not spending time with her while she grew up, making her effectively lose her father when she had already lost her mother. Klein had promised him that he would make a visit to the beautiful coastal city if he had the chance to visit his daughter. Having probed for more information earlier, Klein had gained a general idea about Nilu Raymond's situation. After this girl graduated from grammar school, she worked at the Women and Children Care Foundation, which was run by the Church of the Evernight Goddess. She had a weekly salary of £2.10 solely and was the target of envy by her neighbors. She also inherited an inheritance from her businessman father. As for how much it was, no one knew. They just knew that she was richer than most people from the middle class. Typically speaking, women with such wealth would place great emphasis on their marriage. They would repeatedly select and observe candidates, resulting in their late marriage. However, Nilu had married to a civil servant just a year later. As both parties were believers of the Evernight Goddess, she didn't take on her husband's last name. She continued going by the name Nilu Raymond, and she continued staying at 67 Red Indus Street. After hearing Klein's answer, the maidservant quickly requested him to wait as she entered the living room to report to her mistress. Before long, a woman in a home dress walked to the door. She had black hair and blue eyes. Her face was rather thin, and she was rather pretty. She resembled Davy Raymond. "Good evening, sir. I'm Nilu, Davy Raymond's daughter." "May I know when you got to know my father?" Nilu Raymond asked politely but warily. Klein took off his hat and smiled. "I got to know him at sea. It's been several years." "She toffis pos-pols? My cages pos-pols." Nilu Raymond swept him with a wary gaze and said, "Perhaps you might not know, but he has already passed away." Klein sighed and replied, "Yes, I know. I got to know him through that disaster. He had some words to say back then which I didn't think too much about. However, the more I thought about it in recent years, the more I felt that I should inform you." "Is that so?" Nilu said softly. After some thought, she invited him. "Please come in. Would you mind if my husband listens in?" "Freesai." "This is up to you to decide," Klein frankly replied. Nilu nodded and led Klein into the study. Her husband had the looks of an ordinary civil servant with a gentleman's bearing. He put down his newspapers and followed them in. After both parties sat down, Klein looked at the couple on the sofa and deliberated. Mr. Davy Raymond once experienced disaster after another. He lost his father, mother, wife, brothers, and sisters. Nilu nodded with a deadpan expression. "I know." Klein thought and continued. "He appears to be a merchant, but he was in fact seeking out the murderers who caused that disaster." "I know." Nilu didn't object to it. Klein glanced at her and continued. "He dedicated himself to this matter, and he was very regretful that he didn't manage to spend time with you growing up, making you lose your father alongside your mother." Nilu fell silent for a second before she rapidly replied, "I know." Klein swept his gaze to the old books around him and sighed silently. "He said that his greatest wish was to see you enter the hall of marriage, under the witness of the goddess, to have your own family, and to not be lonely anymore. I believe he should be very happy right now, Nilu's gaze slowly moved away from Klein's face as she turned agape, answering only 2 seconds later. "I know." Klein leaned forward slightly as he clasped his hands. "He said that he might die at sea, and he wanted me to tell you that he died as a result of an accident. All the murderers from before have already been punished. You do not need to hate anyone. He also said that he loves you very much and that he's very sorry. Isem Zadia." Nilu remained silent for a few seconds as she blinked. She turned her head to the side and scoffed with an unclear attitude. "Got it." Klein gave her a deep look before getting up. "I'm done passing on the message. It's time I leave." Met with silence. Nilu's husband nodded gently as a gesture of thanks. Klein turned around, walked to the door of the study. Just as he twisted the doorknob, Nilu Raymond's voice sounded from behind him, deep and hoarse. "Mian, what kind of person do you think he was?" Klein fell silent for a second, turned his head, and curled his lips. "Ho," he said with a smile, "a guardian." He didn't stay any longer as he opened the door and walked to the coat rack. When he wore his hat and left 67 Red Indus Street, soft, restrained sobbing suddenly drilled into his ears. Shaking his head silently, Klein left the borough and entered a cathedral of the Evernight Goddess. Passing through the dark and serene aisle, he sat in the 7th row from the back. He faced the crimson half-moon and the black sacred emblem filled with resplendent stars. He took off his hat, lowered his head, and held his hands to his mouth, just like the many believers present. While praying silently in the silence and tranquility, time quickly passed. Klein slowly opened his eyes as he gently stood up. At the spot where he sat, he left behind an item wrapped in paper. Klein walked along the aisle and left the prayer hall, going straight to the cathedral's entrance. With his back facing the hall, he wore his hat, raised his right hand, and snapped his fingers. Pah! The paper suddenly ignited where he sat, garnering the priest's attention. When this gentleman rushed over, the flames had already extinguished, leaving behind a dark gem-like item. This is... Although the priest didn't know what the item was, his spiritual perception told him that it was very important. When he and the other priests rushed outside the cathedral, the gentleman in a tailcoat and half-top hat had already disappeared. The next morning, through a local black market, Klein had obtained a new identity as he came to the steam locomotive station. In his hand was a second-class ticket worth 18 soldi, as well as identification documents for himself. He held a black leather suitcase as he stood at the platform with his back straight, awaiting the arrival of the train headed for Backland. The present him was a middle-aged man who was nearing his 40s. He was slightly more than 180 centimeters tall, and his black hair had a few silver strands. His deep blue eyes were like a lake at night, and he was rather good-looking. He gave off mature and elegant vibes. Looking down at the identification documents, Klein's eyes reflected his present name, Dwayne Dantes. After some thought, he placed the suitcase on the ground, laid it down, and opened it before stuffing all his identification documents inside. Inside the suitcase, there was a black wooden box containing the former Lowen soldier, Frunziar Edwards' ashes. Moments after arranging his suitcase, he heard a whistle. A steam train chugged into the station, spewing smoke before it slowed down to a halt. He looked up and cast his gaze forward as he examined it in silence. Then he looked down at his suitcase and whispered, "Hiss, beep, then it's time to return. Mom." He then stood straight, carried his belongings, and walked to the open carriage door. Pause. Backland, Chairwood Borough, 26 Gunstead Street. Benson took off his hat, removed his coat, and handed it to the maidservant. He looked at his sister, Melissa, who was glued to her book in the living room. The entrance examinations are in June. You'll finally experience the pain of studiously studying that I endured back then. Melissa didn't look up as she continued reading. Mashi, I'm studiously studying every day. Mashi, a little humor, Melissa, a little humor. What's the difference between a person without humor and a curly-haired baboon? Benson said with a smile. Melissa casually glanced at him and said, That wasn't what you said in the past. She didn't correct him on what the exact difference was between humans and curly-haired baboons, and she instead said, Do civil servants also finish work so late? No, there's been a lot of work recently. As you know, oh, you don't. In such a huge reform, the handing over of work and the straightening out of different relationships are very troublesome. Benson swept the mirror in the living room. He couldn't help but lift his hand to comb his hair as he said with a look of displeasure, Although I'm only a low-ranking employee in the Ministry of Finance, that doesn't stop me from having plenty of work. The only thing to be happy about it that I finally survived the darn probationary period. I'll soon have a weekly salary of £3. Melissa put down her book and she walked to the dining hall and said to Benson, It's dinner time. She paused and said very seriously, I read in the papers that there's something called Donningsman tree sap that has a significant effect on boosting hair growth. Benson's face immediately had mixed expressions. Pause. Whoosh! Amidst the whistle, the long steam locomotive chugged into Backland. Klein picked up his suitcase and once again stepped into the capital of capitals, the land of hope. He discovered that the smog had thinned significantly, and there wasn't the obvious palish yellow colors. The gas street lamps on the platform were already turned on, dispersing the gloominess and darkness. Surveying the area, Klein walked out the steam locomotive station, took the metro and a carriage, and came to a Church of Storms cemetery outside Westboro. Then, he spent a little bit of money and placed Frunziar Edwards' ashes into a partition. By then, this lone soldier had already left Backland for more than 165 years. After taking a step back, Klein observed it for a moment before using a pen and paper to engrave something on the partition door. Frunziar Edward. He closed his eyes and added, Every journey has its destination.